there, and welcome to the Troop Leading Procedures class. This is for MS202, Lesson 05. I'm Captain Silver Beatty, and I'm going to be walking you through this presentation. So to start off with our learning objectives for right now, we're just going to identify the 8 steps of the Troop Leading Procedures, also known as the TLPs. We're going to describe how the different elements of METT-TC, OAKOC, and ASCOPE apply to those TLPs. And then we're going to finish off by discussing what we call the 1/3, 2/3 rule for planning. So kicking it off, I want you to just take a few seconds, few moments, and think about whether you've ever been involved in planning some sort of an event, whether it's big or small, just something that you've planned in the past. And then I want you to think about whether it was difficult or challenging and why it may have been. And then what do you think could have helped in aiding you to make that a little less difficult? Now, as we go through the TLPs here, you might see how some of the things that the Army has implemented in their planning procedures may have helped you with that event as well, and how we can tie that into real life. So the first step of that troop leading procedure is we're going to receive the mission. Then we're going to issue what we call a warning order, a WARNORD, some people might call it a WARNO. Then you're going to start making your tentative plan. So if you're thinking about like from an essay standpoint, you're receiving your assignment, you're going to issue yourself like your warning of how this is going to go, and then you'll start your draft. Then you're going to initiate troop movement. You're going to conduct your reconnaissance. You're going to complete your plan based on the things that you find out during troop movement and conducting your reconnaissance. Then you're going to issue your operations order, also known as the OPORD. And then everybody's favorite, we supervise and refine. So those are your basic 8 steps. That's the order that they typically would go in. However, while you are making and completing your plan, initiating troop movement and conducting reconnaissance can be happening at the same time. Because in all reality, a lot of the information you receive from step 4 and 5 is going to aid in completing that plan. Now, the big thing with troop leading procedures is what they provide us. What's the point? So they provide us just a basic 8-step standardized process to solve our tactical problems. However, as you'll see as we go through this presentation, you can apply this in basically all aspects of your life. But for the intention of ROTC, we're talking about tactical problems here. They provide a sequence of actions to use to make sure that your time is being used effectively and efficiently, hence why we're also going to be talking about time management. And then they provide your small unit leaders at the company and below a framework for planning. So we're only thinking about company commander and below, how you work through a tactical problem. So we're going to take a little bit more time to think about something here. When you look at that standardized procedure, you've got your 8 steps. What are the advantages of having a standardized process that goes step by step? And then what do you think could be some of the disadvantages of this? And don't worry, there's no right or wrong answers, just thinking about what could be good and what might hinder you. Right, moving right into the very first step here, we're going to receive the mission. Now, who do we receive the mission from? That's going to be based on your position. So it's typically going to be your higher echelon. So if you are a company commander, you're receiving it from your battalion commander. If you're a platoon leader, you're receiving it from your company commander, and so forth down the line. Your mission could be in the form of a warning order, operations order, or a fragmentary order, also known as WARNORD, OPORD, and FRAGORD. Typically, if you're thinking about this or watching this from an ROTC standpoint, you're likely receiving your mission from a tactical perspective in either an operations order or a FRAGORD to an operations order. And your next step after receiving that mission is you need to immediately conduct an initial time management analysis. And this is incredibly important because keeping your time and understanding your different timelines and benchmarks throughout the mission is going to keep you on track to ensure that you have enough time for planning, but ultimately that you have enough time to actually execute your mission. And so with that, we use what we call the 1/3, 2/3 rule, but in real life and outside of Army life, we just call this backwards planning. That's all it is. And we'll talk more about that at the end. So after you've received that mission, now you're going to issue a WARNORD to your subordinates. And this provides advance notice of the operations and their initial instructions. It's not a ton of information, it's just the basic information they need to know what's coming and what they need to prepare in order to execute this mission. What you don't want to do is sacrifice time to gain more info. Get the information out to your subordinates as fast as possible. It should follow generally the OPORD format, but it needs to provide, no matter what your mission or the nature of your operation that you're doing it, your time and place for when you're going to be issuing the OPORD to them, who you want participating in this operation, any specific tasks that you want them completing that's not already part of your SOP, and then a timeline for your operation. Now, after you've issued that WARNORD, you're going to move right into making your tentative plan. And in order to do this, you're going to have to use what we call METT-TC, which we'll talk about momentarily. And then you're also going to want to use what we call the Army problem-solving process, which is lesson 4. If you haven't already reviewed that, take some time to look back at that so that you understand how to best choose a course of action, your best course of action moving forward. Now, while you're making that tentative plan, your subordinates should be starting their troop movement. And this includes just moving them to positions where they need to be in order to accomplish their specific tasks. It also could include their specific team or squad rehearsals that they need to be completing. It includes prepping the equipment that their specific team or squad will be utilizing during the mission. It's really just getting ready for the mission. Also, while that's happening, you're going to be conducting reconnaissance, which is something that can be delegated out. It's something that can be pushed to somebody else to start doing, but it's really just used to confirm or deny the terrain that's available that you're going to be utilizing, doing an enemy analysis, and any kind of tactical operations that are happening. What type of recon that you choose is going to be dictated by the situation and the time that you have in order to do it. So if you're thinking about this from an ROTC perspective, you're not going to have a lot of time to conduct a full recon of the area. However, what you do have available typically is your map, maybe aerial and ground photos, maybe an aerial recon, and or talking to others that have direct knowledge of that specific area of operations, or what we call the AO. And another thing that we hear about with recon, we always hear about a leader's recon. You do want to plan and conduct a leader's recon for most missions. Not if you're doing a movement to contact mission, of course, but this isn't where this falls in. A leader's recon is done during the execution of the mission. It's not done during your TLPs. And the last thing you want to do when you're talking about reconnaissance is consider the risks. Consider what type of mission you're on. Consider what type of recon you're going to utilize, that maybe somebody might be seen. Is there a risk to actually moving out and doing a ground recon, route recon? Most people will just use their map as their recon if you're talking about ROTC labs or missions, sticks lanes, etc. But in real big Army, there's all kinds of ways to conduct this reconnaissance. And once you've received some information from your subordinate leaders, especially during your recon, this is where you should be completing your plan. So you've started a plan, maybe you found some information that's going to change your initial way or initial thought process. Now you're completing it. You're taking that information, you have decided the best course of action. So you're going to develop an op order based on that first tentative plan and any recon and additional guidance you've gotten since you started that plan. You have to review that plan and ensure that the mission and the commander's intent are satisfied. That just means that this entire plan is actually going to execute the mission that you're supposed to, and it's meeting the intent that the commander has given. And as we talked about, you need to consider whether or not your recon or any kind of changes to the situation have changed or affected your tentative plan. And then when you complete this, you're writing it out in the 5-paragraph OPORD format, which if you haven't seen that yet, that's going to be lessons 8 and 9 that'll go into the different details. But those 5 paragraphs are your situation, mission, execution, sustainment, command, and signal. So make sure you review lessons 8 and 9 in order to understand what goes into each of those paragraphs from your final plan. All right, so we've completed our plan. Now we're going to issue that op order. This can be done usually either verbally or written. If you're thinking again from an ROTC perspective, you are likely receiving a mission and giving a mission out on a 6 lane verbally, right? So you're going to use different supplements. And the reason this is important is because it allows, especially terrain models, sand tables, map boards, overlays, sketches, this gives all of your subordinates and people on the mission a way to visualize what's actually going to happen. So don't forget to use those supplements. Put your effort and time into terrain models, sand tables, etc., and then utilize them as you're going through specifically the execution paragraph. But again, that'll be saved for a later lesson. And the most important part of this is making sure that every single soldier, every single person on this mission understands the plan. And you can do this with what we call either confirmation briefs or back briefs. So once you issue that op order, at the end, you're asking very specific questions to different people, what their tasks are, what the mission is itself, what the grid coordinates are, etc. But you have to make sure that your soldiers actually understand what's going on. And then everybody's favorite, we call this supervise and refine. And a lot of people think that this is just the sit back, watch what's happening as we're preparing to step off. But it's actually the most in-depth if you think about it from a leader's standpoint. So we say that it has to be habitual. What does this mean? Make it a habit. Everything that you're doing, making sure that you are supervising and actually in it with your people going through each particular section. During this time, you're clarifying the commander's intent, you're reinforcing your scheme of maneuver, and you're ensuring that there's understanding and instilled confidence in all of your participants. So this is when your rehearsals are happening, you're making adjustments, you're making sure that people understand what their actions on are going to look like, etc. It provides feedback to you, provides feedback to your subordinates, and then the biggest, it's bold right there, it exposes problems in your plan. It is so important to make sure that you have time to conduct these rehearsals, because this is when you can find out that, oh, this isn't going to work, we need to adjust fire and do something different. And of course, as you're always going to hear, we do PCCs, PCIs. Those are actually two pretty different things. We're not going to talk about the differences in this lesson, but during this time, you're also doing a weapons and ammo check, maybe a test fire. You're checking your uniforms and equipment. You're checking for your mission essential equipment, making sure it's functional, it's good to go. You're checking your soldiers' understanding of the mission and their very specific responsibilities within that. You're doing your comms checks, you're checking for food and water, and if you haven't already, you're camoing up during this time. All right, so that is the 8 steps of the TLPs. And we talked towards the beginning of how to analyze your mission. We use what we call METT-TC. And this is taking information about the mission, your enemy, the terrain, weather, troops and people that you have available or things that you have available, the time that you have to conduct this, taking your civil considerations and any other information considerations to make your plan. I also want to reiterate or iterate really that you need to use this from the enemy's perspective in order to better understand their different courses of action as well. Another way to look at this, if you look at METT-TC, you've got your elements on the left there, all 7 of them, and they should be answering the questions to the right. So for your mission, what are your 5 W's? Your enemy, what is known about them? When you're analyzing terrain and weather, not just what it is, but how does it affect your operation? Troops and support available, that's who, what's available to you to utilize. Your time available, how much time do you have for planning and execution? Your civil considerations, not just what they are, but how do they affect your mission and how? And information considerations, what other informational elements do you have that affect everything else? Now moving even deeper into METT-TC, you have that one bolded there called civil considerations. And this is where we use what we call ASCOPE. So you're thinking about, from a civil standpoint, the area, the structures, capabilities, organizations, the actual people themselves, and other events that might be happening. So going back, taking all of that from ASCOPE should help you understand how civil elements might affect your mission. And so take just another few seconds to think about this. How does incomplete or incorrect information affect mission planning and execution? Why is it so important that you have correct, up-to-date, and complete information? And hopefully your answer is so that you can correctly plan your mission and execute, because if you're working off information that's not complete and or incorrect, it could really throw everything off. And then moving into OAKOC. So these are your observation and fields of fire, the different avenues of approach, your key and decisive terrain, your obstacles, and then cover and concealment. Now remember, cover protects you from physical harm, concealment just protects you from observation. Two different things. But all of these analyze the effects of your terrain and weather on your mission. So we're just going to continue breaking things down even more here. All right, so lastly, we're going to talk 1/3, 2/3 rule, or some sort of time management. And this rule is essentially just saying that we use 1/3 of the time available before execution for planning purposes. And then we use 2/3 of our time available for preparation and execution. When it comes to your timelines, your 1/3 essentially ends when you're issuing your op order. You want to make sure that you do that time management analysis at the very beginning so that you know when you have to issue your op order and how much time you have to complete those first 6 steps of your TLPs. Time management is absolutely critical. You cannot successfully apply your TLPs in a solid way and at their best potential if you are not managing your time. And with this, if you're an MS3 or you're an MS2 that's getting close to actually issuing op orders and doing sticks lanes, I would highly recommend that you ping somebody to be your timekeeper. They can keep you on track. So then another question here, does this timeline differ depending on the type of mission you're on? And in all reality, it technically does, but it really doesn't. So for an offensive operation, your time begins when you receive the mission. The person giving you the mission is likely going to say, the time is now, ... what are your questions? That is when your timeline starts. Basically, the clock is ticking from there. The time ends when you begin the attack or offensive operation of some sort. With a defensive operation, the time begins at the same time, but it ends when you have to be prepared to defend your mission. Easy answer, foot stomp. Your time ends by the time that's within your mission. The no later than time is when your time ends. So if we were to be conducting a time management analysis, okay, and I know this is big stuff. This might be a little confusing, especially since I'm just talking it at you. Your time begins when they say, time is now, ... what are your questions? Your time is going to end with the mission must be completed no later than ... That's your entire timeline. From there, you take 1/3 of that total time and add that to your first timeline when you receive the mission, and that's when you should be issuing your op order, in and around that general timeline. Okay, and don't worry, we're going to practice this in just a moment. So if it is 0830, you receive a mission to defend your position no later than 1730. When is the latest time that you should plan to issue your final op order? So when we do this, we know that from 0830 to 1730 is 9 hours. The next step is we're going to divide that into thirds. 1/3 is 3 hours. So we add 3 hours to 0830, which means you should be issuing your op order no later than 1130. It also gives you 3 hours to basically go from making your issuing your WARNO, to issuing your op order, completing all those steps in between. And who said that you are never going to have to do math again, right? All right, we're gonna do it one more time here, a little bit more difficult. It's 1630. You receive a mission to assault the enemy target at 0200. When is the latest time you should plan to issue your final op order to your unit? So we're going to break it into thirds one more time. 1630 to 02 is 9 hours and 30 minutes. Divide that by 3. You've got 3 hours and 10 minutes. 3 hours and 10 minutes plus 1630 is 1940. So you should be issuing your op order at 1940. Now, do you understand why I say the very first thing you should do after you receive your mission is conduct your time management analysis? Because if you just go straight into, okay, I'm going to issue a warn-out. Well, during that warn-out, you're supposed to be giving the time that you're going to have them meet you back for the op-ord. So you take that additional 30 seconds, 1 minute, however long it takes you to figure out how much time you have, and write down and have a plan in place for when you're going to issue that op order. All right, and with that, that is your Troop Leading Procedures class, lesson 05 for MS202. We went over the 8 steps of the TLPs, described how the elements of METT-TC, OAKOC, and ASCOPE apply to those TLPs, and then we discussed the 1/3, 2/3 rule with just a little bit of practice. I do recommend that you take some time to just practice that on your own as well. Practice with some friends, your buddies, practice in your class. Just really get used to having to do the quick math on breaking down your 1/3, 2/3 rule. And as always, feel free, if you have any questions, to find your ROTC instructor, maybe an MS4, MS3, see if you can get those questions answered. If you can't, you're more than welcome to reach out to me at silver.beatty@mso.umt.edu. I'll do my best to answer any of your questions. If you're watching this after 2026, I may be a little bit more difficult to get a hold of, but just let me know and I will do my best. Thank you.